CEO's paralyzed daughter sat alone at her graduation until a single dad walked over. In a sea of applause and flashing cameras, one young woman sat forgotten by the world. Her cap was slightly askew, her wheelchair parked in the shadows while joy swirled around her. She had no family cheering, no hand to squeeze, no arms to celebrate with. But across the crowded hall, an 8-year-old boy tugged at his father's sleeve and whispered, "Dad, why is she all alone?" That single question would ignite a chain of moments that neither the girl nor the weary single father could have imagined. Follow my story until the end, and don't forget to comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The grand auditorium of Westbridge University pulsed with life. Spotlights swept across the stage where graduates crossed one by one diplomas clutched in trembling hands. Families roared with pride, whistles pierced the air, and cameras snapped like fireworks. A brass band played a triumphant march, filling the air with a jubilant rhythm. But near the wide glass window at the far end of the hall sat a young woman who seemed untouched by the celebration. Her name tag read Emily Sinclair. She was 22 honors graduate in business administration, summa cum laude. Yet none of the brilliance reflected in her pale face. She sat motionless in her wheelchair, cap tilted awkwardly, fingers gripping the crumpled program in her lap. Her long blonde hair spilled forward, half veiling her eyes. Those eyes were rimmed red, not from joy, but from holding back tears. Everyone else surged with life, but Emily seemed frozen a lone island in a sea of triumph. "Dad," a boy's voice broke the hum. 8-year-old Ethan Carter tugged at his father's hand, his mop of brown hair sticking out as if electricity ran through it. His small face was scrunched in worry as he pointed toward the window. "Why is that lady sitting all by herself?" Daniel Carter followed his son's gaze. His calloused fingers still stained faintly with grease from shifts at the manufacturing plant tightened around Ethan's smaller hand. He saw her, how alone she looked, and something in his chest clenched hard. "Maybe her family got lost in the crowd," Buddy Daniel murmured, though a heaviness tugged at him. He knew loneliness when he saw it. Ethan's grip only grew firmer. "She looks really sad. Can we go say hi?" Daniel hesitated. They were here to support his friend Roberto, who was walking across the stage any moment now, and he'd learned through bitter experience that approaching strangers could backfire. But the sight of Emily, her isolation like a shadow in all the brightness, reminded him of nights he'd sat alone wishing someone would notice his pain. "Okay," Daniel said at last, his voice quiet, "but just to say congratulations. If she wants privacy, we'll respect that." The boy grinned and practically pulled him forward through the throng. Families parted briefly, curious as a working-class man in faded jeans and a restless child made their way toward the forgotten graduate. Up close, Daniel could see the tears clinging stubbornly to Emily's lashes. The name tag confirmed it, Emily Sinclair. Summa cum laude. An incredible achievement, and yet here she sat utterly alone. Ethan, unbothered by any sense of hesitation, piped up with a bright, "Hi, I'm Ethan. This is my dad, Daniel. We just wanted to say congratulations." Emily blinked, startled. She looked as though kindness from strangers was a language she hadn't practiced in years. Her lips parted, then curved weakly into a whisper. "Thank you," she murmured. Her voice almost drowned by the roar of applause as another name was called on stage. Daniel crouched slightly, leveling himself with his son, then lifted his gaze to meet hers. "I hope we're not intruding. My boy has this gift, noticing when someone might need a friend." For a moment, Emily's guarded mask wavered. Surprise flickered in her green eyes, followed by something softer. Hope, fragile and unfamiliar. "No, it's fine. Thank you for stopping." Ethan, oblivious to the weight in the air, continued cheerfully. "My dad says graduation is super important. You must be really smart to graduate from this big school." Ethan Daniel chided gently, but to his surprise, Emily let out a faint laugh, light but real, like the crackle of fire on a cold night. "I suppose I must be somewhat smart," she said, her tone holding the first glimpse of warmth. Her hand brushed the armrest of her wheelchair, a gesture so small, yet filled with unspoken pain. Daniel noticed the tremor in her voice, the way her eyes slid away when anyone came near. This wasn't just shyness. It was something deeper. "We came for my friend Roberto's graduation," Daniel said, easing the conversation. "But honestly, I think Ethan here was more excited than Roberto himself." "It's my first time at a graduation," Ethan announced proudly. "My dad says when I grow up I can come to school here too. Do you think they'll remember me?" Emily's lips curved into a fuller smile now. She leaned just slightly forward, studying Ethan's eager expression. "I think anyone who meets you would remember you." Daniel felt a strange warmth unfurl in his chest, watching her soften. Around them, families laughed, cameras flashed names, echoed, but in that little bubble of conversation it felt oddly quiet. No one came to Emily, no classmates seeking selfies, no relatives waving programs. She sat in a sea of emptiness. "Are you waiting for someone?" Ethan asked, direct as always. Emily hesitated. Her composure faltered. She glanced down at her hands, then spoke in a low tone. "No. My father is at a conference overseas. He couldn't make it." The words landed like a stone in Daniel's heart. He knew that ache all too well, the sting of milestones unshared. He thought of Ethan's birthdays, school recitals, scraped knees. How many times he'd wished Clara were alive to share those moments. But Emily had no one. Daniel exhaled slowly. He looked at her, then at his boy, then back again. Something inside him shifted. This young woman had conquered so much, yet sat with no one to celebrate her. "Well," he said gently, almost surprising himself, "would you like us to take a photo for you? Every graduate should have a picture to remember this day." Emily's eyes widened, as if no one had thought to offer. "Oh, you don't have to." Ethan grinned. "Dad's really good at taking pictures. He takes lots of me because Mom can't." The innocence of his voice hung heavy. Clara had died the day Ethan was born. To Ethan, it was simply fact. To Daniel, it was a wound he carried every day. Emily's gaze softened, understanding flickering across her face. I would actually like that," she whispered. Daniel pulled his battered smartphone from his pocket. He shifted around, trying angles, guiding Emily to tilt her cap, to lift her chin. And slowly her expression changed. A tentative smile bloomed into something radiant, fragile, yet real. When he showed her the photos, Emily's hand lifted to her mouth. For the first time that day, she saw herself not as an abandoned daughter in a wheelchair, but as a graduate. "They're beautiful," she breathed. "Thank you." Daniel gave a small nod. But inside, he felt something profound stir. This wasn't the end of a chance encounter. It was the beginning. The applause thundered again as another graduate's name echoed across the auditorium. Proud families leapt to their feet, capturing the moment with phones held high. Yet in the corner by the window, Daniel noticed the silence surrounding Emily. Even after he and Ethan had stopped to speak with her, no one else came. It stirred something inside him, an ache he couldn't quite name. Ethan, on the other hand, had no hesitation. "Dad, take another one," he urged, tugging on Daniel's sleeve. "She should have a photo with us too." Daniel hesitated. He didn't want to overstep, but Emily's faint smile, half surprise, half curiosity, was enough to convince him. "If you're comfortable," he said gently, "Ethan would like a picture with you." Emily blinked, then gave the smallest nod. "All right." Without waiting for further permission, Ethan scrambled beside her wheelchair, beaming as if he'd just met his favorite superhero. Daniel lifted the phone and snapped the shot. Emily studied it afterward, her fingers brushing the screen lightly. "It's nice," she admitted, as though the word itself were foreign on her tongue. "You look happy," Daniel said. "I don't usually see myself that way," she whispered almost to herself. Ethan grinned. "That's because you didn't have us before." Daniel ruffled his son's hair, half embarrassed by his boldness, but Emily let out a soft laugh, the kind that seemed to surprise even her. It wasn't polished or polite. It was real. For a few minutes, the three of them stood in a little island of warmth while the celebration raged on around them. The world outside blurred into noise. Inside, the moment held a quiet intimacy. But the silence that followed pressed heavy. Daniel noticed Emily's eyes flicking back toward the stage, then drifting again to the floor. The fragile smile faded. Ethan, true to form, asked the question that cut straight to the heart. Don't you have anybody to clap for you, like friends? Emily's throat bobbed. Her hand tightened on the armrest of her chair. Not today, she murmured. Daniel could see her bracing, ready for pity, but Ethan only tilted his head, considering. Then he leaned against her armrest with complete ease, as though she were family already. That's okay. We can clap for you. Before Daniel could stop him, Ethan clapped his small hands together with cheerful force. Yay, Emily! He shouted loud enough that a few people turned and smiled. Emily gasped, and then to Daniel's astonishment, she laughed. It spilled out of her like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. She raised a hand to her lips, trying to hide it, but the sound lingered sweet and trembling. Daniel's chest tightened at the sight. This woman, so composed, so hidden, was for just a second a young graduate basking in joy. You didn't have to do that, Emily said, shaking her head. Sure we did, Ethan replied. Everyone deserves clapping on graduation day. My teacher says so. Emily met Daniel's eyes, and in that unspoken moment he understood something she hadn't expected: kindness. Not here, not anywhere. The final names were called and families began flooding toward the exits. Bursts of laughter and the smell of flowers filled the air. Daniel knew it was nearly time to leave. He had promised Roberto they would meet him outside. Still, the idea of walking away, of leaving Emily once again stranded in her solitude, felt wrong, in a way that gnawed at him. He crouched slightly, softening his tone. Would you like us to walk out with you? No one should celebrate alone. Emily hesitated. The instinct to decline was written in the way her shoulders tightened, the way her gaze darted toward the door as though calculating an escape. But then Ethan spoke again, his voice filled with simple hope. Please come. We can sit together outside. Dad says the sun feels good after being stuck inside. For a long beat, Emily was silent. Then she let out a breath, shaky but resolute. All right, I'd like that. Daniel offered to push her chair, but she shook her head. I can manage. He respected that, yet walked close enough to shield her from the crowd's careless bumps and shoves. As they moved, Daniel noticed how people skirted around Emily, some glancing quickly away as though her presence were uncomfortable. He felt a flare of anger. How could they not see her? Not the chair, not the silence, but the strength it had taken to sit through this day alone. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted the campus lawn in gold. Students hugged families, snapped pictures near the stone fountain, and car horns honked from overflowing parking lots. Emily parked her chair under a maple tree, the breeze lifting strands of her hair. For the first time that day, her posture eased. Ethan flopped down in the grass at her feet. Dad, can we get ice cream after this? Daniel chuckled. We'll see. Emily smiled faintly. What's your favorite flavor? Chocolate chip cookie dough? Ethan declared without hesitation. What's yours? Emily thought for a moment. Forest green. Ethan blinked. That's the color, not a flavor. She laughed softly. You're right. I meant mint chocolate chip. But forest green is my favorite color, because even in dark forests, life still grows. Daniel studied her quietly. He saw the poetry in her answer, the way she reached for meaning even in small things. And he realized he wanted to hear more. Emily, he said gently, congratulations. Not just for today, but for everything. It takes more strength than people know just to get here. Her eyes flicked to his, and in them he saw gratitude so raw it almost undid him. For the first time, Daniel wondered if this meeting, this moment, wasn't just chance. It felt like the start of something neither of them had expected. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn, bathing the campus in warm light. Families scattered in every direction, arms full of flowers, cameras raised to catch graduates in cap and gown. But under the maple tree, the three of them lingered in their own small circle. Daniel adjusted his stance, folding his arms loosely as he watched his son sitting cross-legged in the grass. Emily's chair was angled toward them, the sunlight catching in her hair. For the first time, she didn't look like someone bracing for the world's dismissal. She looked present. Emily, Ethan said suddenly, his young voice carrying across the lawn. Why weren't your mom and dad here? My dad always comes to my stuff. Well, except when he has to work, but he always tries. Daniel opened his mouth to hush him, but Emily beat him to it with a small smile. My mother passed away when I was a baby, she said softly. And my father, he's at a business conference overseas. Her tone was even, but Daniel didn't miss the tiny quiver in it. Ethan frowned. That's not fair. You worked really hard and he didn't even come. Daniel placed a hand on his son's shoulder, but Emily surprised him with a quiet laugh. It's all right. He provides for me in other ways. He's always been busy. But Daniel heard what she didn't say. He didn't want to be here. A heavy silence fell, broken only by distant laughter from the fountain. Emily's fingers toyed with the crumpled graduation program in her lap, folding and unfolding it as though the paper could absorb her grief. Daniel cleared his throat gently. My wife, Clara, she passed away when Ethan was born. So, I understand a little of what it's like celebrating milestones with one person missing. Emily's eyes lifted slowly, meeting his. There was no pity in her gaze, only recognition. Two people carrying losses too heavy for their years. I'm sorry, she said simply. Daniel gave a small nod. Thank you. Ethan looked between them, his young mind processing more than he let on. Then without warning, he scrambled to his feet, leaned forward, and wrapped his arms around Emily's shoulders. You're really cool, he said firmly. And really brave, too. Emily froze, startled by the sudden contact. For a heartbeat, Daniel considered pulling his son back, but then Emily's hands trembled, rose and returned the embrace. Her eyes squeezed shut as tears slipped free this time, not silent tears of shame, but something else. Gratitude. Relief. Daniel swallowed hard, his chest tightening at the sight. Ethan's instinctive kindness had reached a place Daniel never could have. When Ethan stepped back, Emily wiped at her cheeks, quickly embarrassed. But her smile, unsteady, watery, was the brightest Daniel had seen all day. Thank you, Ethan, she whispered. You're pretty cool yourself. The boy grinned, satisfied. For a while they sat in companionable silence, listening to the chaos of families winding down their celebrations. The crowd thinned. The campus lawn emptied. Daniel glanced at his watch. The drive back to their small apartment was long, and Ethan would be hungry soon. Yet the thought of leaving Emily here alone again twisted something inside him. Listen, he said carefully. I know we just met, but would you like to get some ice cream with us? There's a little place not far from here. Emily's eyes widened. She looked as though he'd suggested something outrageous. Ice cream. Ethan bounced eagerly. Yes, please, come. Dad never buys ice cream because he says it's too expensive, but today's special. Daniel flushed, embarrassed at his son's honesty. Ethan. But Emily laughed, a sound fuller, warmer than before. In that case, I'd love to. And the ice cream is my treat. Consider it a graduation celebration. Daniel's shoulders eased. If you're sure. I'm sure. The words carried a weight Daniel didn't miss, as though saying yes to something small meant breaking a habit of saying no to life. They walked together toward the parking lot. Daniel guided Emily down the ramp, staying close, but letting her steer her own chair. Ethan skipped ahead, pointing out things. Only children notice: a dog chasing a frisbee, a balloon tangled in a tree, a car honking cheerfully as it drove past. By the time they reached the small family-owned ice cream parlor on Main Street, the awkwardness had softened into something lighter. The shop's bell jingled as they entered, the air cool and sweet with the smell of sugar cones. Mismatched chairs, faded photographs on the walls, a chalkboard menu written in messy white script. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like home. Emily's posture relaxed the moment she rolled inside. Away from the grand hall and the polished expectations of her university, she seemed freer. They settled into a corner booth, Ethan climbing into the seat across from her while Daniel fetched the cones. When he returned, Emily was already engaged in a serious debate with Ethan about the best toppings for chocolate chip cookie dough. You can't just put sprinkles on everything, she teased. Why not? Ethan shot back, grinning. Sprinkles make life better. Emily laughed again, and Daniel felt something in his chest shift. He hadn't heard laughter like that around his family in years. As they ate, the conversation deepened. Emily spoke with quiet conviction about her passion for business, her desire to change how companies approached inclusivity. Daniel listened, struck by the fire in her words. What about you? She asked, eyes curious. He stirred his melting vanilla. I dropped out of high school when my dad left. Had to work to support my mom and siblings. Met Clara at the factory. We had plans, big ones. But life changed. Her gaze softened. Clara died when Ethan was born. Daniel nodded, his voice low. Since then, it's just been us. Some days, harder than others. Emily didn't rush to fill the silence. She let him speak or not without pressure. That quiet acceptance was more healing than anything else. When Ethan declared his ice cream the best in the world, Emily smiled and leaned back, her eyes shimmering with something Daniel recognized, the fragile beginning of trust. For her, this was more than ice cream. It was the first step out of isolation, and for him it was the first time in years he felt like he wasn't carrying everything alone. The evening settled over the little town, spilling gold and rose hues across the streets as the sun sank lower. Inside the ice cream parlor, mismatched lamps glowed warmly, casting soft halos on the old photos pinned to the walls, portraits of Little League teams, family reunions, and birthday parties. It was the kind of place that smelled faintly of sugar and nostalgia, the kind of place where memories were made. Emily sat across from Ethan, her cone balanced delicately in one hand. For the first time all day, she looked less like a solemn graduate and more like any young woman savoring a treat after a long ceremony. Her shoulders had loosened, her laughter came easier, and even the faint sadness in her eyes seemed gentler. Ethan leaned forward, his face sticky with chocolate. "Do you like college?" he asked with the blunt curiosity only children possessed. Emily tilted her head, thinking. Yes, but it wasn't always easy. Because of the wheelchair, Ethan asked. Daniel shot him a warning glance. Ethan. But Emily lifted her hand. It's all right. He's just asking. She looked at Ethan kindly. Yes, partly because of the wheelchair. College campuses aren't always built with people like me in mind. Some days it felt like the world forgot I existed. Ethan frowned, chewing on her words as he licked his spoon. That's dumb. They should fix it. Emily's lips curved. I agree. Daniel watched the exchange, struck by the way Emily didn't flinch from honesty. Most people would have brushed off Ethan's question or masked their discomfort with politeness. But Emily met it directly, giving the boy both truth and dignity. Is that why you studied business? Daniel asked after a pause. To fix things? Emily nodded. I want to understand how companies work, how decisions are made. Because if I can understand that, maybe I can help change it, make workplaces more accessible, more inclusive. Daniel stirred his ice cream slowly, considering her words. That sounds like something that could really matter. I hope so, she said softly. Then her eyes flicked up green and searching. What about you, Daniel? Do you ever wish you could go back to school? He gave a short laugh, half embarrassed. Every day. I had to quit at 17 when my dad walked out. Somebody had to pay the bills. I always thought I'd go back, maybe get a trade certificate. But then, Clara got pregnant. We had plans, big ones. She wanted to be a nurse. I was going to get my GED. His voice trailed off, the familiar ache rising in his chest. When she died, everything stopped. Emily's gaze softened. That must have been devastating. Daniel shrugged one shoulder, though his throat was tight. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Ethan needed me, so I just kept moving. From his seat, Ethan looked up, spoon still in his mouth. Dad's the strongest person I know, he announced proudly. Daniel chuckled, brushing his son's hair back. But Emily studied him in silence, her expression tender. You're stronger than you think, she murmured. The words startled him. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear them. For a while, they lingered in easy conversation. Ethan asked Emily about her favorite colors, her favorite books, even her favorite superhero. She answered each question with thoughtful humor, her guard lowering piece by piece. Daniel found himself laughing more than he had in months. By the time their cones dwindled to crumbs and melted streaks, the awkwardness had melted away with them. When they finally stepped outside, the air had cooled. The street lamps flickered on, glowing against the dusk. Families still strolled through town, graduates still wearing their gowns like capes. Ethan skipped ahead on the sidewalk, swinging his arms dramatically. That was the best graduation party ever, he shouted. Daniel chuckled. It wasn't our graduation, buddy. Doesn't matter, Ethan said firmly. It was fun. Right. Emily. Emily smiled, her chair rolling smoothly beside Daniel. Yes, Ethan, it was. They reached Daniel's car. The paint faded and the bumper scuffed. He felt a twinge of self-consciousness as he opened the door for Ethan. Compared to the polished sedans lined up along the curb, his old vehicle looked weary. But Emily didn't comment. She only looked at him with quiet gratitude. Thank you, she said. For today. Daniel shook his head. You don't need to thank us. Yes, I do. Her voice was steady now, but her eyes shimmered. I was dreading this day. But you and Ethan made it. Something I'll remember. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to say something that captured the weight of what had passed between them, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he simply nodded. Ethan climbed into the back seat, waving cheerfully. Bye. Emily? We'll see you again, right? Emily hesitated. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that made her look years younger. I'd like that. As Daniel drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Emily still sat on the sidewalk watching them go, her figure framed by the glow of the street lamp. And though he didn't know how or why, he felt certain this wasn't the end. Something had begun tonight, something fragile, unexpected, and deeply human. The hum of the old car filled the short silence after they pulled away from the curb, a low, familiar thrum that always made the dash rattle at 40 miles an hour. Ethan leaned forward between the seats, still fizzing with leftover happiness from the ice cream, his seatbelt snug against his shoulder. Daniel kept one hand on the wheel, the other loose at 10 o'clock, replaying the last image he'd seen in the rear view, a young woman under a street lamp lifting a hand to them, as if she couldn't quite believe they'd been real. Dad. Ethan said, his voice bright. If Emily didn't have anyone, does that mean we're her someone's now? Daniel's mouth curved. Maybe we were tonight. I think we should be tomorrow too, Ethan decided. And on Saturday, and maybe forever. A laugh escaped Daniel before he could catch it. Easy champ, one day at a time. But as he turned onto their block, the laughter faded into a softer thing. One day at a time had been his survival mantra since the night a nurse pressed a swaddled baby into his arms and told him Clara was gone. One day at a time had gotten him through sleepless feedings, second shifts, pink notices, and the kind of grief that made sound feel like sand in his ears. Tonight, one day at a time felt different, like a door cracked open where there'd only been wall. The apartment smelled faintly of laundry detergent and old wood. He flipped on the kitchen light, set the mail on the counter, and started water for pasta while Ethan kicked off his sneakers and narrated the ice cream parlor to his action figures lined along the windowsill. Butter hissed in the pan. He stirred in garlic and canned tomatoes, the practical alchemy he knew by heart. When he reached for 2 chipped bowls, his eyes snagged on the picture frame near the microwave, Clara 19, on a Ferris wheel, hair windblown, laughing into the sky. Hey, Clara, he said under his breath, a habit he never fully shook. He's okay. We're okay. Then, surprising himself, he added, and we met someone today. Someone kind. Ethan patted in, sock feet whispering on the linoleum. Can I text Emily the picture where I'm making the superhero face? Do we have her number? Daniel wiped his hands and pulled out his phone. He did have it, she'd given it to him, so he could send the photos. He hesitated 1 second, feeling that old prickle of self-consciousness, and then told himself not to be a coward. He attached 3 shots, the one under the window with her cap tilted just so the one with Ethan leaning against her armrest, and a candid he'd snapped in the doorway of the parlor when she'd laughed without warning. These came out great. Proud of you today, D? He hovered over send, changed, proud of you to hope you like. These changed it back. Then he pressed the blue arrow and set the phone down like it might burn him. The reply came before the pasta water boiled. Daniel, I didn't think I'd want photos from today, but these, thank you. I look like myself in them. E. Another bubble blinked. Also, Ethan is officially my favorite hype man. Ethan whooped when Daniel read it aloud. That means I get the superhero picture right. Ask her. Ethan dictated slow and careful. Can I send a silly one? Please don't be mad. Daniel typed it verbatim, resisting the urge to soften his kid's directness with emojis. I could never be mad at you. Came back almost instantly. Send it. They ate at the wobbly table with the window cracked to let in a cool ribbon of night air. After dishes after bath time and a tangled bedtime story where Ethan made the dragon politely apologize for scaring the villagers, the apartment settled into its familiar hush. The cheap fridge hummed. A car door thunked in the lot. Somewhere downstairs, a TV laughed too loud. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed and scrolled up the thread. I look like myself in them. He didn't realize he'd said the words out loud until his phone buzzed again and her name lit the screen. Not a text this time. A call. For a second he stared at it, that old hitch in his chest. What if he didn't know how to talk to someone anymore? Then he swiped to answer. "Hey," he said. "Hey, Emily." Echoed a smile tucked into the single syllable. "Sorry to call late." "It's not late. I just wanted to say thank you with my actual voice. You and Ethan changed what today feels like in my head." Daniel leaned back against the headboard lights off the room blue with street glow. "You don't owe us thanks." "I know," she said softly. "That's why it means more." A small pause. "Is Ethan asleep out like a light?" "I sent him a trophy emoji," she confessed. "I hope that's acceptable hype man protocol. Pretty sure you just made his year." A shared quiet settled, the easy kind he hadn't felt with a stranger in a long time. He could hear something faint on her end, maybe the whir of an air purifier, the distant honk of a city 2 neighborhoods nicer than his. "Can I ask you something slightly odd?" she said. "Ask. Do you know a place that still prints photos, like actual paper prints? I haven't printed any since—" Her voice thinned at the edges. "Well, it's been a while. Pharmacy on Maple," he said. "They still do 1 hour, probably more like 90 minutes if Carl's working." She laughed. "Carl sounds like a 90-minute guy. Carl is a 2-hour guy if he's telling you about his fishing boat." Silence again. "Then, would you pick them up with me? I know that's silly. I just don't want to walk in alone and feel like I'm making a fuss over pictures that shouldn't matter this much." "Not silly," Daniel said. "Tell me when." "Saturday. After lunch I can meet you outside. There's a bench with a bad paint job. I know it." They lingered another few minutes trading small human facts. She hated cinnamon in coffee, but loved it in toast. His left knee ached when it rained a souvenir from a dock job before Ethan. She loved mint chip because it tasted like cold air. He preferred vanilla because it never pretended to be anything else. When they finally said goodnight, he realized he was smiling in the dark. At the plant the next day, the foreman barked about quotas, and the bay doors stuck again. On break, Daniel ate a turkey sandwich on the back steps and scrolled through 2 fresh messages, a photo of Emily's diploma on her kitchen table beside a glass of water beaded with condensation, and a close-up of the tassel she'd kept in a folded napkin, as if saving it from a day that had almost ruined it. "Do you save little things?" she'd written. "I never used to. Lately I want to." He snapped a picture of his wallet. Tucked behind a worn grocery receipt, a yellowed movie ticket from an old matinee with Clara, the last time they could afford a theater, a crayon drawing of 3 lopsided stick figures Ethan made when he was 4, a pressed clover he'd found on a day he'd needed a miracle and settled for a symbol. "Yeah," he typed. "Little things keep big things from crowding out the good." "That's exactly it," she replied. By Friday, the thread between them felt like a rope braid messages woven through work and chores, bright strands of ordinary life. She sent a link to an article about how small policy changes could transform a workplace for disabled employees. He sent a video of Ethan inventing a pasta dance to celebrate spaghetti night. She teased that Ethan's rhythm was a public health emergency. He mock-defended his son's artistic expression. Under the levity, something steadier grew, a sense that they were both in their separate apartments, breathing easier. That evening, Roberto called to crow about a job interview. "You coming to O'Malley's tomorrow?" "We're celebrating my freedom from student debt when I marry rich," Can't Daniel said before he'd thought it through. "Got a thing." Roberto snorted. "A thing? Is she tall, short, mysterious, allergic to fun?" Daniel laughed. "She's a friend." Roberto's voice softened. "Hey, good. You deserve a friend." Saturday came soft and bright, the kind of early summer day that makes even cracked sidewalks look like invitation. Daniel and Ethan stood by the pharmacy's automatic doors as they shuddered open and shut like a lazy mouth. The place smelled like floor cleaner and grape lollipops. From the photo counter, a man in a faded fishing cap lifted a hand. Carl Daniel whispered, "Does he have a boat?" Ethan whispered back, reverent. "Two, if you ask him." Emily rolled in, a minute later, sunlight riding her hair. She wore a forest green sweater, the exact color she'd named, and it made her eyes look like places on a map that promised shade and water. She looked at the two of them and smiled as if relief were a physical thing. "Ready?" she asked. Carl, indeed a 90-minute man, ceremoniously produced a fat paper envelope. Emily slid a fingernail under the flap and drew out the stack. The top photo caught the light, her by the window cap, a little crooked, smiling at something just off camera. She sucked in a breath so small it might have been missed if Daniel hadn't been watching her. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "It's ridiculous how much I needed these." "Not ridiculous," Daniel said. Ethan edged closer. "Can I see the superhero one?" She flipped through until she found it, Ethan grinning with his arms crossed like a brave knight beside her. He beamed. "We have to frame it." "We do," she agreed. Then her fingers paused on another picture, the one Daniel had taken in the ice cream doorway, all unguarded laughter. She touched the corner gently like you touch a pet that used to startle at kindness. "I didn't know I could still look like that." "You always did," Daniel said before he could stop himself. "It just took a day worth remembering." She met his eyes, and in that glance was the fragile contract of two people deciding to trust a little more. They paid Carl, told a generous portion of a fishing story, and stepped back into sunlight with a white pharmacy bag and a plan to find frames at the thrift store on Pine. On the way, Ethan chattered about where to hang a picture in their apartment. Above the window, he decided. "So the sun can clap for it in the morning." "Sunlight clapping," Emily repeated, smiling. "I like that." At the thrift store, they dug through a bin of mismatched frames. Ethan picked a gold one shaped like a crown. Daniel found a simple wood frame with a nick in the corner. Emily chose a clean white border that made the green in her eyes jump off the paper when they tried the photo behind it. Small purchases. Small errands, a Saturday, written in ordinary ink, and yet it felt like moving furniture in their hearts, making room. They ended in the park with lemonade sweating onto a picnic table. Children screeched from the swings. A terrier the size of a loaf of bread attempted to herd three teenagers off the grass. A breeze pressed leaves together in a soft applause. "I used to think I was a burden," Emily said quietly, watching a kite bob against the bright. "Not for any one reason, just the math of me felt heavy to people." Daniel shook his head. "Their math's wrong." She looked down, then back up. "Today I believed you." Ethan slurped loudly, then looked serious. "Are we still your someones?" Emily's laugh broke into the warm air like a bell. "Yes, Ethan. If you'll have me." "We'll have you," Daniel said. The words landed inside him with a comfort that felt like truth. By the time the sun leaned west, they'd chosen where to hang the frames in two different homes. They said goodbye with the awkwardness of people who didn't want to, and a promise to meet at Riverside next weekend for a picnic that would not by any stretch be a father-son event, but something else entirely. Driving home, Ethan hummed his pasta dance under his breath, and Daniel let the quiet hold them. The day had been made of small things, prints, frames, lemonades, a kite stitched to the sky. But somewhere inside those small things, a future had quietly changed lanes. By Sunday morning, the photo frames had already begun their quiet work. On Daniel's windowsill, the wood frame caught the early light, so it looked as if the sun itself stood clapping for the picture of Emily laughing in the ice cream doorway. Across town, in her neat apartment that smelled faintly of citrus cleaner, Emily's white frame leaned against a stack of books, holding her smile steady against the wall. Two homes stitched together by a single Saturday seemed suddenly less separate. The week unfolded like beads on a string, work shifts, homework errands, and threaded between messages that felt like a new way of breathing. Emily sent Daniel snapshots of her world rain sliding down her fourth-floor window, a chipped coffee mug, a list on her phone titled Small Wins. Daniel answered with Ethan's crooked volcano model and greasy-fingered sketches on scrap paper from the plant. On Tuesday, while Daniel wrestled with a jammed bay door, his phone buzzed. A photo of white lilies filled the screen. From my father's office, Emily's caption read, delivered by his assistant. Congratulations again. Yes? Daniel frowned. He typed, Do they smell good? Too good. Gives me a headache, she replied. After a pause, another message. He means well. He just doesn't know how to be here without billing someone for the hour. Daniel didn't try to fix it. He told her about Carl the photo clerk and his endless fishing stories. 3 laughing emojis appeared, followed by words that slowed. Sometimes it's easier to be competent than to be loved. People applaud competence. Love asks them to stay. That night a storm swept in. Rain pounded the glass, the power snapped off. Ethan whooped in the dark, thrilled. Daniel built a tent of sheets, lit a flashlight. Then his phone buzzed. Lights out here too. I hate the dark when elevators die. You safe? He typed. Stuck on 4. Not going anywhere unless I crawl. He hesitated, erased, then wrote, Want company on the phone. We'll read you Ethan's pirate story, please. So Ethan read aloud under the tent, his voice is outrageous. Between accents, Emily laughed, the sound catching and then smoothing like someone testing a bridge and finding it would hold. When the pirates hit a wave, thunder answered outside and all 3 of them shouted Yar into the night. After Ethan fell asleep, Emily's voice softened. I used to love storms. After the accident, weather turned into logistics ramps, generators, stairwells. It's exhausting having to plan so hard just to be a person. Yeah, Daniel murmured. Do you want to know how it happened? Only if you want to tell it. She told him. A sorority ski trip, a trail too steep, the squeak of snow when you're almost out of control, neon jackets brushing past her laughter, then the sudden immovable tree. I remember the taste of pine, she whispered. Then nothing. Then not being able to make my feet be feet. Her father had flown in for 36 hours installing experts, ordering meals she couldn't eat, flowers she couldn't smell. He was good at paying attention to the problem. I don't think he knew how to pay attention to me. Daniel let her words rest, not rushing to fill the silence. I became very good at not needing anyone, she went on. But the other day at the pharmacy, when Ethan asked for the superhero picture, I didn't feel like math. I felt like a person. Daniel leaned back against the wall, eyes closed. You are a person, Emily, before the lists and after the lists. Her breath shivered down the line. Thank you. By Wednesday morning, the storm had passed. She texted a picture of her wheels polished clean, self-care as elbow grease, and he laughed at work. Later he called to rehearse interview questions. Why this company, he read. Because I'm tired of waiting for someone else to fix it, she answered slowly. Because I want kids in wheelchairs to feel bored by how well everything already works. There it is, Daniel said. Say that. Make them wish they thought of it first. Friday. Emily rolled into a glassy lobby smelling of polished stone. The interview was half promise, half insult. One manager impressed another, asking if she could keep up. She left under a too blue sky and texted, Not terrible. Not amazing. But I didn't disappear. Then after a beat, coffee. Not to fix anything. Just to share oxygen. Daniel was already halfway there before he admitted to himself he'd said yes. They met at a park cart, traded tea for cookies, and sat on a peeling bench. She told him about the questions that stung and the ones that sparked hope. He told her about Ethan's spelling test and how bleach had ruined his favorite shirt. They didn't touch, but he felt belonging settle over them like shade. When they parted, there was no excuse, only a plan. Sunday library study room B, mock interview. Ethan declared himself vice president of snacks, and Emily grinned as she made him a badge with her label maker. That night, Daniel paused by the framed photo on the sill. In the reflection for a split second, he swore he saw 3 figures instead of 2. Across town, Emily wrote a new line under her small wins list, asked for what I needed. Didn't apologize for it. She turned out the light, lying awake, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar noise of a future knocking. Sunday came with the gentle hush of a small-town morning. The streets near the library were still damp from a night shower, and the air smelled faintly of wet earth and coffee drifting from the cafe across the square. Daniel parked the old sedan by the curb, listening to its engine sputter into silence. Ethan bounced in the back seat, a backpack stuffed with juice boxes and crackers strapped on like he was preparing for an expedition. Dad, remember I'm vice president of snacks, he announced proudly. Daniel grinned. Yes, sir. I'll defer to your expertise. When they stepped into the library, the cool air greeted them along with the faint musk of old paper. Emily was already there, waiting outside study room B, a stack of printed notes balanced neatly on her lap. She wore a soft gray sweater and jeans, but it wasn't the clothes Daniel noticed. It was the way she smiled when she saw them, hesitant at first, then brighter, as if she'd been holding her breath all morning and could finally exhale. You came, she said softly. Wouldn't miss it, Daniel replied. Ethan barreled forward and plopped his backpack on the table inside. Okay, rules. No boring snacks, no falling asleep, and if anyone says synergy, they have to buy me candy. Emily laughed, covering her mouth with her hand. Daniel chuckled and shook his head. Looks like we're in good hands. For the next hour, Daniel played mock interviewer, his voice deliberately gruff. Tell me why we should hire you, Ms. Sinclair. Emily sat straight, her eyes steady. Because I understand not just what makes a company profitable, but what makes it human. If businesses don't include everyone, they're leaving half their potential on the table. Daniel nodded approvingly, jotting notes on Ethan's notepad for dramatic effect. Good answer. Strong. But what about when someone doubts your abilities? Emily hesitated, her hands tightening on the armrests. She glanced at Ethan, who was munching loudly on pretzels. His brown eyes met hers, utterly trusting. I'd remind them that leadership isn't about walking the farthest distance, she said slowly. It's about seeing farther, and I've learned to see what most people overlook. Daniel's throat tightened. The room felt charged, the words hanging like something holy. He broke character, leaning forward. That right there, that's what you need to show them. The fire, not the resume. Emily's lips parted. For a long moment, she only looked at him, her green eyes flickering with something unspoken. Then she nodded. Thank you. For believing when I can't. Always, Daniel said quietly. Ethan, oblivious to the weight of the moment, announced snack break and pushed juice boxes across the table. The heaviness dissolved into laughter, and they spent the rest of the afternoon sharing stories, Emily confessing how she once got stuck in a dorm elevator for 3 hours with nothing but a bag of popcorn, Daniel, recalling the time Ethan tried to fix the toaster with peanut butter. By the time they left the library, sunlight had softened into late afternoon glow. Emily wheeled beside them toward the parking lot. She looked lighter somehow, her laugh more unguarded, her shoulders not quite so tense. Thank you for today, she said, pausing at the curb. I haven't felt useful in a long time. You reminded me I still am. Daniel met her gaze, something steady rising in his chest. You've always been useful. You just needed someone to see it. Their eyes lingered, the silence between them carrying more than words. Then Ethan broke it with childlike certainty. Emily, you should come to our apartment. We could hang your photo next to ours. That way it's like one big family picture. Emily's breath caught, her smile wavering into something fragile. She looked at Daniel, searching for his reaction. He swallowed. Only if you want to, he said carefully. Her lips trembled into a smile. I'd like that. Very much. That evening, Daniel cleared the cluttered kitchen table, moving stacks of unpaid bills and Ethan's homework to the counter. Emily placed her frame carefully beside theirs on the windowsill where the fading sun touched both photographs equally. For a moment, the three of them stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the light catch their captured smiles. And Daniel thought maybe this is how families are built, not with grand gestures, but with small decisions to stay. Later, after Ethan had drifted to sleep, Emily lingered by the door, her hand resting on the frame of her chair. I know I should go, she whispered, but it feels harder to leave than I expected. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her not to leave, to stay, to never go back to that quiet apartment where lilies wilted in their vase. But he only said, then don't rush. So she stayed, and they talked until midnight about Clara, about the accident, about the scars you can't photograph. And when she finally wheeled out into the cool night, Daniel knew something had shifted beyond friendship. The next morning, the framed photographs on the sill gleamed side by side, as if the house itself was learning to welcome her. By the end of that week, Daniel realized how quickly a routine could grow roots. It started with small messages in the morning, Emily sending him a photo of her coffee mug beside a half-read business journal, Daniel replying with Ethan's lopsided cereal tower on the kitchen counter. At first it was simple ordinary, but soon the silence in between began to feel heavy, as though the day tilted toward the next time his phone would buzz with her name. Friday night, just as Daniel was scrubbing grease from his hands after a long shift, the car finally gave out. The old sedan coughed twice and went still in the factory lot. He leaned back against the wheel, rubbing his forehead. He could walk home, but how would he get Ethan to school on Monday? How would he get himself to work? When his phone buzzed, he almost ignored it, but the screen lit with Emily's name. "How was your day?" He typed back. "Car died. Can't even get it to turn over. Don't know what I'm gonna do." The dots blinked, stopped, then blinked again. Finally, "Do you want help? I can research some used cars, maybe compare prices. At least give you options." He stared at the screen. No one had offered to carry his burden in years, not since Clara. His instinct was to decline to insist he could handle it, but something in Emily's earlier words, "I haven't felt useful in a long time," echoed in his mind. "If you want to," he typed. That night, while Ethan dozed in his bed, Daniel sat on the couch scrolling through the spreadsheet Emily had emailed. She had cross-referenced reviews, gas mileage, repair history, even marked a column for safety first for Ethan. He called her without thinking. "You really did all this?" he asked when she answered. "You needed help," she said simply. "And I could help. Isn't that what friends do?" Daniel pressed a hand to his eyes. Yeah, it is." The quiet between them stretched comfortable this time. He could hear a faint hum in the background. Maybe her fridge, maybe a city bus outside. "Emily," he said softly, "I don't remember the last time someone did something like this for me." "Then maybe it's time you get used to it," she whispered. The next day, he borrowed Roberto's truck and drove to look at a sedan Emily had flagged as reliable. She joined him rolling across the lot with a folder of notes like she'd prepared for a board meeting. Ethan ran ahead, bouncing on the cracked asphalt, calling, "This one, Dad. It looks like a superhero car." Daniel laughed, embarrassed at how seriously she had taken it. But Emily only grinned. "I told you I do my research." By Monday, the Carters had a new-to-them sedan parked outside their building. It was nothing fancy, paint-chipped seats worn, but it started every time. And when Daniel looked at Emily as she adjusted the frame on her lap and nodded approvingly, he realized it wasn't just the car that felt new. It was the way his life seemed to be making space for her. That evening, while Ethan spread crayons across the table, Emily lingered with Daniel in the kitchen. She watched as he chopped onions for spaghetti, her eyes following the easy rhythm of his hands. "You've built so much with so little," she said quietly. "Most people wouldn't have survived what you did." Daniel shrugged, blinking against the sting of the onion. "Didn't have a choice. Ethan needed me. That's what makes it remarkable," she replied. He set the knife down, meeting her gaze. "You really think that I know it?" For a long moment, neither moved. Then Ethan shouted from the other room, breaking the spell, "Dad." "Emily, look at my dragon drawing." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head, and the tension dissolved into laughter. But later, when Emily wheeled home under the soft glow of the street lamps, Daniel stood at the window watching her leave. Something inside him ached at the sight. He wanted to call her back to ask her to stay. Instead, he whispered into the empty kitchen, "Don't get used to walking away. Not anymore." Across town, Emily placed the folder of car notes on her counter and stared at it. Her apartment was neat polished, the lilies from her father's assistant already drooping in their vase. But the room felt emptier than ever. For the first time in years, she wished someone else were here to share the silence. She glanced at the framed photo on her windowsill, the one of her laughing outside the ice cream shop. In the reflection, her apartment looked warmer than it was. And she realized Daniel had been right. Maybe little things really could keep the big things from crowding out the good. 2 weeks later, the air in town had turned crisp, the first signs of autumn curling along the edges of the trees. Emily wheeled up the cracked sidewalk toward the cafe, where she and Daniel had agreed to meet. Her phone buzzed in her lap, an alert from yet another job board, another posting she'd applied to days ago. She didn't even need to open it to know Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to move forward with other candidates. She silenced the notification. Rejection had become a rhythm, the dull thud of doors closing. Each one stung less and less, yet it wore her down all the same. When Daniel spotted her from across the street, he raised a hand in greeting, Ethan skipping at his side with his backpack bouncing. Emily's shoulders eased despite herself. Inside the cafe smelled of roasted beans and warm bread. Daniel bought 2 coffees and a cocoa for Ethan, and they slid into a booth. For a few minutes, they chatted about Ethan's spelling test, about the car that still purred thanks to Emily's research about the weather turning. But Daniel caught the faint tightness around Emily's smile. Another one he asked gently. She looked down ashamed at how easily he read her. Yes, same story. They liked my resume, they liked my ideas, until they saw the chair. Then it was all polite smiles and promises to keep me in mind. Ethan frowned, slurping his cocoa. That's dumb. They should want you even more. You're like superhero smart. Emily's laugh was watery. If only the world worked that way, Ethan. Daniel leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table. Emily, listen to me. They don't see you because you're giving them the polished version, the safe answers. Stop trying to be what you think they want. Show them the fire you showed me. She blinked, surprised. Fire. The reason you studied business, the reason you care. That's what makes you unstoppable. Not the degree, not the resume. You. Her throat worked. And what if they still don't see it? Then it's their loss, Daniel said firmly. Something in his tone rooted her, steadied her. She stared into her coffee, then back at him, and for the first time in weeks her chest loosened. Later outside the cafe, the sky blushed with evening. Ethan was skipping ahead, chasing leaves in the breeze, while Daniel lingered beside her chair. You've got this, he said quietly. I believe in you. She swallowed, her voice trembling. You always know what to say. Because I see you, he replied. Not the chair, not the rejection letters, just you. For a moment their eyes locked heavy with words unspoken. Then Ethan shouted, Come on, you two, and the spell broke into laughter. The next morning, Emily sat in another interview, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, polished shoes clicking across the floor. For once, she didn't hide behind rehearsed answers. When asked why she wanted the position, she took a breath and said, Because I know what it feels like to be shut out, and I want to make sure fewer people ever have to feel that way. The panel went silent. One woman leaned forward, intrigued. For the first time, Emily left feeling like she had given them herself, not a version she had polished to safety. That evening, she texted Daniel. You were right. I didn't disappear today. I think I burned a little. His reply came quick. That's the Emily I know. That's the one they'll never forget. Emily stared at the message until her chest ached. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone to believe in her this fiercely. At home, Daniel tucked Ethan into bed. The boy clutched his stuffed bear and whispered, Dad, do you think Emily could be like my aunt forever? Not just until the photos fade. Daniel smoothed his son's hair. Maybe Buddy. Maybe she'll be even more than that. He didn't know where the thought had come from, but once spoken, it lingered warm and terrifying. Meanwhile, in her apartment, Emily placed her interview notes on the counter and wheeled to the window. Beyond the glass, the city lights glimmered indifferent. Yet for the first time, she didn't feel invisible, because somewhere out there someone had looked straight through the walls she'd built and told her he saw her. And that made all the difference. The first chill of October had crept in, leaves spinning across the sidewalks like confetti. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of day that begged for open windows and flannel jackets. Ethan was already bouncing around their small apartment, waving a flyer from school. Dad, the father-son picnic is today. Remember, Mrs. Hanson said we should bring someone special. Daniel rubbed the sleep from his eyes. We're going, buddy. Relax. But can Emily come? Ethan asked, his voice pitched high with hope. She has to. She's my favorite special. Daniel froze, mid-buttoning his shirt. He hadn't thought about it, hadn't wanted to put pressure on Emily. But before he could answer, Ethan was already pulling his phone from the counter. Can I text her? Daniel sighed, but his heart softened. Go ahead. Minutes later, Emily replied, "Are you sure it wouldn't be strange?" Daniel typed back quickly. "Not strange at all. We'd love to have you." By noon, Riverside Park buzzed with families. Blankets sprawled across the grass, children darted between picnic tables, and the smell of grilled hot dogs hung in the air. Daniel set their basket down, watching as Ethan spotted Emily wheeling across the field. "Emily," he shouted, running to her. She waved her forest green scarf fluttering in the breeze. When she reached their blanket, Daniel helped clear a space, but she insisted on maneuvering herself. Her independence was quiet but fierce. Soon, Ethan was tugging at her sleeve, introducing her to classmates with the same boldness he showed everywhere. "This is my friend Emily. She's really smart. She graduated from the big school." The children swarmed her with questions. "Does it hurt to be in a wheelchair?" one girl asked. Sometimes Emily answered honestly. "But everyone has something about their body that can be tricky. Some people wear glasses, some need hearing aids. This is just how I get around." "Can I try sitting in it?" another boy blurted. Emily smiled. "Only if your parents say yes." Within minutes, there was a line of second graders taking turns laughing as they rolled a few feet. Emily guided each, patiently answering their curiosity with warmth. Daniel stood back, watching his chest tightening with an emotion he didn't dare name. She looked natural. Not as a guest or outsider, but as someone who belonged. Later, when the kids ran off to chase a soccer ball, Daniel spread a blanket and sat beside her. The sunlight glinted off the river and laughter floated across the park. "You're good with them," he said quietly. Emily shrugged, though her cheeks flushed. "Children don't see limitations, just possibilities." "Ethan sees you," Daniel murmured. Her eyes flicked to his, catching something raw there. "And what do you see?" Daniel hesitated. The truth pressed against his chest. "I see the woman who's been slowly stitching herself into the fabric of our lives. I see the future I didn't think I deserved." But he only said, "I see someone strong, stronger than anyone realizes." The silence that followed was rich, full of unsaid things. Emily reached for her cup, her hand trembling slightly, and Daniel had to resist the urge to cover it with his own. The afternoon drifted in laughter and games, Ethan tugging them into his orbit. Emily helped him build a lopsided tower of cups, cheering when it didn't collapse. Daniel grilled hot dogs and caught himself glancing at her every few minutes, as though afraid she might vanish. As the sun dipped lower, painting the park in amber light, they sat watching Ethan cartwheel across the grass with a group of kids. Daniel exhaled, his voice low. "You know, for a long time I thought our family was incomplete, like we were missing some piece that made other families whole." Emily turned to him, her green eyes steady. But watching him today, seeing how happy he is, how naturally he includes others, "I think maybe we've been whole all along. Maybe we just needed the right person to share it with." Her eyes shimmered. She reached out, hesitating only a second before letting her hand rest against his. "Daniel, I've spent most of my life feeling like I was too much trouble, too different, too complicated. But with you and Ethan, I don't feel that way anymore. I feel enough." The weight of her words settled between them heavier than the autumn air. Daniel squeezed her hand gently, his heart pounding. Ethan shouted for them to watch another cartwheel, breaking the moment into laughter again. But as they packed up and walked toward the car, Daniel knew something had shifted irreversibly. It was no longer just kindness drawing them together. It was something deeper, stronger, and far more dangerous. Love was beginning to stir. The glow of the father-son picnic lingered in Daniel's mind long after they'd returned home. That night, as he tucked Ethan into bed, the boy asked sleepily, "Dad, can Emily come to everything now?" "Not just special stuff, everything." Daniel smoothed his hair back. "We'll see, buddy." But in his chest, the answer was already yes. Over the next weeks, Emily became part of their rhythm. She joined them at the Saturday farmers market, laughing when Ethan insisted on buying the ugliest pumpkin for Halloween. She helped Daniel cook chili one rainy evening, her precise chopping of onions putting his haphazard knife work to shame. And she started sending Ethan encouraging notes before his spelling tests, typed in bold, cheerful fonts he adored. Yet as the bond deepened, so did Daniel's unease. Love was blooming. He could feel it in the way Emily's laughter softened his weariness, in the way her presence filled corners of his life he hadn't realized were empty. but love was dangerous. Clara's absence had taught him that, and the gap between their worlds, her wealth, his paycheck-to-paycheck existence, loomed like a canyon he wasn't sure they could cross. One Thursday evening after Ethan had gone to bed, Daniel lingered by the kitchen sink as Emily packed her bag. She had been helping Ethan with math homework, and the house still hummed with the echo of their laughter. "You don't have to keep doing this," Daniel said suddenly. His voice came out rougher than he meant. Emily stilled. "Doing what? Spending time here, carrying our world on your shoulders. You have your own life." She wheeled closer, her eyes searching his face. "Daniel, I'm not here out of pity. I'm here because I want to be." His hands gripped the counter. "I just don't want you to wake up one day and realize we're an anchor holding you back." Her voice was quiet, but steady. "You're not an anchor. You're the reason I'm starting to believe I could actually build a life worth living." The words left him shaken, but before he could answer, his phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Roberto, "Congrats to Emily. Saw the company announcement. She's in the running for that corporate initiative thing, right?" Daniel frowned. "What's this about?" Emily's face shifted. "It's, something. A position at a major firm. They were impressed with my thesis on accessibility. It's everything I've worked for." Daniel forced a smile, though his stomach knotted. "That's incredible." Her gaze lingered on him, hesitant. "The thing is, the job is in Denver." The air seemed to drain from the room. "When would you leave?" Daniel asked quietly. 2 months. He nodded slowly, hiding the twist in his chest. "You have to take it." Emily looked down at her hands. "Do I—" For the first time, I'm not sure what my dream really is. The room fell into silence. Outside, a dog barked down the block. Inside, Daniel's heart pounded with unspoken words. "Don't go. We need you. I need you." But he bit them back, afraid to chain her to a life she might regret. Emily finally broke the quiet. "I should go. It's late." Daniel watched her wheel out the door, his throat thick. Ethan's voice echoed in his memory. "Can Emily come to everything now?" He sank into the chair she had just vacated. The air still warm where she'd been. Love had crept in quietly, and now it demanded an answer. Was he willing to risk his heart again? And was she willing to risk hers? The news of Denver hung between them like a storm cloud, invisible, yet heavy enough to darken every room they shared. Over the next few days, Daniel carried it silently, forcing smiles for Ethan while his mind churned with the same relentless question: what if she leaves Ethan perceptive as always noticed? "Dad, why do you look sad when Emily texts?" he asked one evening as they set the table. Daniel forced a laugh. "I don't. Maybe I'm just tired." But Ethan studied him, his small face earnest. "If she goes away, can we visit her? I don't want her to be lonely again." Daniel's chest ached. "We'll figure it out, buddy." That night after Ethan was asleep, Daniel sat by the glow of his phone. He typed and erased a dozen messages to Emily. "Don't go. Stay here. We need you." Then he shoved the phone aside, afraid of asking her to give up everything she had worked for. Across town, Emily stared at her own screen. Job offer emails blinked in her inbox, filled with numbers and perks that should have thrilled her. Instead, she kept scrolling back to the photo on her desk, Ethan leaning against her wheelchair. Daniel crouched beside him. All three of them grinning like a family caught in sunlight. When they met for coffee that Saturday, the air between them was taut. Daniel stirred his cup absently, avoiding her eyes. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "Daniel, what if I don't want to go?" He looked up sharply. "You can't turn down an opportunity like this. You've worked too hard." She shook her head. "But what if my dream isn't the job anymore? What if my dream is—" Her voice faltered. "Us." The word landed like a stone in Daniel's chest. For a moment he couldn't breathe. "Emily?" he whispered. "Don't say that unless you mean it." "I mean it," she said firmly. Her hands trembled on the cup. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. I love you, Daniel, and I love Ethan. I'd rather build something real with you than chase a title that will leave me successful and alone." Daniel's world tilted. He had imagined this moment, but hearing the words felt unreal. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. I love you too, he admitted. His voice broke. But I'm scared, Emily. I'm a factory worker who never finished school. You're brilliant, destined for things I can't even imagine. I don't want you to give that up for me. Her eyes filled with tears. Don't you get it? I'm not giving anything up. I'm choosing the life I want. With you, with Ethan. That's not sacrifice, it's freedom. Silence wrapped around them, broken only by the hiss of the espresso machine. Daniel squeezed her hand tighter, the weight of her words sinking deep. Later in the park, where they often met, Ethan ran ahead chasing squirrels while Daniel and Emily lingered by the bench. Do you really believe this can work? He asked. Emily's gaze was steady. Yes, because love doesn't care about resumes or bank accounts. It cares about showing up. And you've been showing up for Ethan every day of his life. You showed up for me when no one else did. That's what matters. The sun slanted golden through the trees, catching her hair, and Daniel realized with startling clarity this woman had already become part of his family. But choices still lay ahead. The job offer wouldn't vanish, neither would the fear of not being enough. For the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to imagine a future not just of survival, but of love. And he knew one way or another, everything was about to change. The week that followed was a blur of emotions. Daniel worked his shifts at the plant, went through the motions of packing Ethan's lunches and checking his homework, but every spare thought circled back to Emily's words at the cafe. I love you. I choose you. He couldn't shake the weight of them. Part of him felt elated, as though someone had cracked open a window in a room he didn't realize was suffocating. The other part, the old cautious part, was terrified. Love had cost him once before. Could he risk opening his heart again? Friday evening, he found Emily waiting outside their apartment. She sat in her chair with a small smile, a scarf wrapped around her shoulders against the cool breeze. Ethan spotted her from the stairwell and raced forward, nearly toppling as he threw his arms around her. You came, he shouted. I told you I would. Emily laughed, hugging him back. Daniel's chest tightened at the sight. She fit there on his doorstep in his son's arms, as if she had always belonged. Inside over bowls of spaghetti, Emily broke the news. They officially offered me the position, she said. It's everything I thought I wanted: salary, resources, influence. But she glanced at Ethan, then Daniel. It's in Denver. Daniel's fork stilled. He forced a smile. That's incredible. You deserve it. But do I want it? She asked softly. Her gaze lingered on him. That's the question. The air thickened. Ethan, oblivious, chatted about his science project, but Daniel felt the unspoken words pressing between him and Emily. When Ethan finally excused himself to the living room, Daniel leaned forward. Emily, you can't give this up for us, he said firmly. This is your dream. Her eyes shimmered. Dreams can change. Daniel, I've had money all my life, but I've never been this happy. Not until you and Ethan. He shook his head, struggling to believe. I'm just a guy trying to keep the lights on. You're everything I'm not. Stop, she whispered. Don't diminish yourself. You're the most principled, caring man I've ever met. You've raised an extraordinary son. That's more impressive than any title. Silence stretched between them, thick with emotion. Daniel wanted to believe her, but years of scraping by had carved deep grooves of doubt in him. Then Ethan's voice floated from the living room. Dad, Emily, come look. They joined him to find he'd arranged his drawings across the coffee table, stick figures of himself. Daniel and Emily holding hands under a crooked sun. This is us, he explained proudly. A family. Daniel's throat closed. Emily pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Tears welling. Ethan, she whispered. That's beautiful. The boy grinned. So can we be one? For real. Daniel met Emily's gaze over their son's head. In her eyes he saw the answer neither of them had dared say aloud, yes. For real. Later, after Ethan had gone to bed, they stood by the window, the city lights glinting beyond the glass. Emily reached for his hand, her fingers cool but steady. I love you, she said again, her voice certain. And if there's any chance of building a life together, I want it more than any job. Daniel pulled her into his arms, resting his forehead against hers. For the first time in years, he let himself whisper the words he had buried deep. I love you too. And in that moment, Denver felt 1,000 miles away. What mattered was here in this small apartment, in the laughter of a boy, in the fragile, fierce bond between two souls who had finally found each other. The air inside Daniel's apartment felt different after that night lighter, yet charged with something neither of them could name out loud. They had spoken the words, admitted what had been building between them, but reality wasn't a fairy tale. Choices still pressed against them, unyielding. By Monday morning, Emily was on her way to a follow-up meeting with the firm. Daniel watched her wheel confidently into the glass building, her scarf bright against the steel-gray lobby. He'd driven her there, insisting on waiting in the parking lot, even though she had told him she could manage on her own. When she emerged an hour later, she looked calm, but her eyes betrayed the storm within. "Well," he asked. "They want me in Denver by the end of next month," she said. Her voice was steady, but the words felt like a blade between them. Daniel nodded, jaw tight. "That's fast. I told them I'd think about it." The ride back was quiet, the hum of the road filling the silence. Ethan chattered from the back seat about a spelling game at school, blissfully unaware of the tension. Daniel gripped the wheel harder, fighting the ache in his chest. That evening, when Ethan was asleep, Daniel finally said what had been gnawing at him. "Emily, I can't ask you to give this up. You'll resent me. You'll resent us." Emily looked at him across the kitchen table, her hands folded. "Daniel, you're not asking me. I'm telling you I don't want to go, not if it means leaving behind the only real family I've ever had." He shook his head, frustration thick in his voice. "You're brilliant, Emily. You're going to change the world. And I'm just me. I'm scared you'll wake up one day and regret choosing this life." Her eyes flared with quiet fire. "Someone like you, Daniel, you're the most extraordinary man I've ever known. You've done everything for your son, carried burdens most people couldn't even imagine. Don't you dare belittle that." He opened his mouth, but she cut him off, her voice trembling but fierce. "Money doesn't buy the kind of happiness I've found with you and Ethan. Do you know how many birthdays I've spent alone? How many milestones celebrated with assistants or flowers sent from a boardroom? All I ever wanted was what you already have. Laughter around a dinner table, someone who shows up, someone who cares." Daniel stared at her, the weight of her confession hitting him like a wave. "Emily," his voice broke, "I love you, more than I thought I could love anyone again. But I can't ask you to give up everything." "You're not asking," she whispered. She reached across the table, her hand covering his. I'm choosing us." The silence stretched thick with emotion. Daniel's heart pounded, torn between relief and fear. Finally he asked, "What about the job?" Her lips curved into a small, trembling smile. "Then I'll make them an offer. I'll propose working remotely with travel when necessary. If they want my ideas, they'll find a way. If not, then maybe it wasn't the right place after all." Daniel felt his throat tighten. For years he had survived on scraps of time, scraps of money, scraps of hope. And here she was, choosing him, choosing Ethan, choosing their messy, imperfect little life over everything else. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. "God, I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do," she whispered. "More than anyone." The night ended quietly, but Daniel knew something had shifted permanently. For the first time since Clara's death, the future didn't look like a tunnel with no light. It looked like a door cracked open, waiting for him to step through. The following week, Emily followed through on her vow. She sat across from the firm's board in a sleek conference room, the Denver skyline glittering outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her heart raced, but her voice was calm. "I want this position," she began. "But I want it on terms that allow me to do my best work. That means working remotely from here with travel to Denver quarterly. My focus will be stronger if I can stay rooted where I have support." The executives exchanged wary glances. One man cleared his throat. "Miss Sinclair, this is highly unorthodox. Relocation was expected." Emily's chin lifted. "So was me walking away from my degree after the accident. So was me fading into the background when people saw the chair instead of me. I've been unorthodox my whole life, gentlemen. And if you want someone to lead an accessibility initiative, you should want someone who understands exactly what it feels like to be shut out." Silence followed, taut as a wire. Then one woman, the only female on the panel, smiled faintly. Let's see what we can work out. By the time Emily wheeled out of the building, her phone already buzzing with a tentative offer, she felt lighter than she had in years. She wasn't giving up her dreams. She was reshaping them. That evening, Daniel and Ethan waited at the park bench where they always met. The autumn air was sharp, the leaves scattered like gold coins across the ground. When Emily approached, Ethan leapt up, arms wide. "Did they give you the job?" he shouted. She laughed, hugging him. "Yes and no. They gave me a version of it, one I can do from here." Daniel's brows knit. They agreed to that. "They didn't have much choice," Emily said, grinning. "Turns out when you're the only candidate with a plan that could save them millions, they're willing to be flexible." Daniel shook his head in awe. "You did it." Her gaze softened. "No, we did it. You told me to show them my fire." "And I did." They sat together on the bench, Ethan chasing leaves at their feet. For the first time, the looming shadow of Denver felt far away, replaced by the bright promise of a shared tomorrow. Later that week, Daniel knew it was time to have a different kind of conversation. He sat Ethan down at the kitchen table, the photo frame still glowing on the sill behind them. "Buddy," he began, "you know how special Emily's become to us, right?" Ethan nodded eagerly. "She's like family." Daniel took a steadying breath. "I love her, not just as a friend. The way I loved your mom." Ethan's eyes widened. "Does that mean she might live with us? Like, forever?" Daniel hesitated. "Would you like that?" "Are you kidding?" Ethan grinned. "That would be the best thing ever. She could help me with homework and teach me business words, and we could watch movies all together." Then softer. "Do you think Mom would be okay with it?" Daniel's throat tightened. "I think your mom would want us to be happy. And I think she'd love Emily for making us smile again." Ethan nodded solemnly. "Then yes, let's be a family with Emily." The next evening, Daniel shared the conversation with Emily as they sat in the living room. She listened, tears brimming in her eyes. "Daniel," she whispered, "I've spent my whole life feeling like an outsider in my own family. And now you're telling me, you and Ethan, you want me to be part of yours?" He reached for her hand. Not just part of it, the heart of it. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Emily leaned forward, resting her forehead against his, her tears warm against his cheek. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." And in that quiet, crowded little living room surrounded by crayon drawings and overdue bills, they sealed the promise of a new family, one not built by blood or obligation, but by choice. The days that followed carried a strange rhythm, ordinary, yet touched with something new. Daniel found himself humming as he packed Ethan's lunch, catching Emily's smile across the table, or feeling her hand brush his when they sat side by side on the couch. It wasn't dramatic, not like in the movies, but it was real. And for Daniel, real was more than enough. But not everyone was ready to welcome their little patchwork family. One Saturday morning, as Daniel walked Emily into the community center for Ethan's soccer practice, a few parents whispered in the corner. He caught fragments. "The CEO's daughter. Isn't she paralyzed? What's he doing with her?" He tried to shrug it off, but Emily's posture stiffened in the chair. Inside, Ethan ran onto the field waving at them from across the grass. Emily tried to smile, but Daniel saw the flicker in her eyes, the same old doubt, the voice she fought every day. During halftime, one mother approached. "Emily, Sinclair, isn't it? I read about your work. Quite impressive." Her tone was polite, but her eyes slid briefly to the chair, then to Daniel. "And you're—" "Daniel Hayes," he said evenly. "Ethan's dad." Her smile thinned. "Ah, well, good luck with that." She turned away. Emily's face burned. But before she could say anything, Daniel crouched beside her, speaking low. "Don't let them get to you. They don't know us. They don't know what we've built." Her voice trembled. "I thought I was used to this, but sometimes it still feels like I'll never be enough." Daniel shook his head firm. "Emily, you're more than enough. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me and Ethan. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." She looked at him then, and whatever storm had been gathering behind her eyes eased a little. That night after Ethan had gone to bed, Daniel brewed 2 mugs of tea. They sat on the balcony, the hum of the city rising up beneath them. Emily leaned back, her scarf wrapped around her shoulders, her hair loose in the breeze. "You know," she said softly, "when I first saw you at the graduation, I thought you were just another kind stranger. I had no idea how much you'd change everything." Daniel chuckled. "I thought the same about you. Just a woman sitting alone who needed someone to sit beside her." "Funny how life works," she murmured. Silence lingered comfortable. Then Emily's hand slipped into his. "Daniel, what if we really made this official? Not just us dating. What if we built a home together?" His heart stumbled. "You mean move in?" She nodded, her eyes steady. "Yes, I know it's fast, but I don't want to spend another year waiting to live. I want to be where I feel like I belong, and that's with you, with Ethan." Daniel stared at her, torn between joy and fear. He thought of the bills stacked on the counter, the leaky faucet he hadn't fixed yet, the threadbare couch in the living room. What did he have to offer someone like her? As if reading his mind, Emily whispered, "I don't need perfection, Daniel. I need you, that's all." The words broke something open inside him. He cupped her face gently, leaning in until their foreheads touched. Then, "Yes," he said, his voice raw. "Move in. Let's make this real." Emily's eyes glistened, her lips curving into a smile that lit the night. Then it settled. "We'll start a new chapter, together." From the other room, Ethan stirred and called sleepily, "Dad." "Emily." "Are you still up?" Daniel laughed softly. "Yeah, buddy, we're here." And as Emily squeezed his hand, Daniel realized those words. "We're here" were no longer just about getting through another night. They were about building a life he never thought he'd get to have again. 2 weeks later, the apartment felt different. Emily's books filled the shelves where old unpaid bills used to sit in a messy pile. A bright throw blanket covered the tired couch, smelling faintly of lavender. And Ethan's laughter seemed louder, freer, as if he knew deep down that something solid had finally taken root. One Friday evening, after a long day, Daniel returned from a double shift at the garage. He opened the door and froze. The table was set with candles, crooked, mismatched ones, but glowing just the same. Plates of pasta steamed in the center, and Ethan was bouncing excitedly in his chair. "What's this?" Daniel asked, smiling despite his exhaustion. "A celebration," Emily said, wheeling from the kitchen with a bowl of salad. "Of us." Ethan clapped his hands. "Our family dinner." Daniel's throat tightened. He pulled out a chair and sat across from Emily, Ethan wedged happily between them. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't grand, but it was everything. Halfway through the meal, Ethan leaned forward. "Dad, Emily, do you think maybe we could make it official? Like, you two could get married?" Daniel nearly choked on his water. Emily's fork clattered against her plate. Ethan's face flushed. "Sorry. I didn't mean..." "No," Daniel said quickly, clearing his throat. He reached across to ruffle his son's hair. "Don't apologize. You're just ahead of us, that's all." Emily's eyes met Daniel's. 1,000 unspoken words passed between them. She smiled softly. "It's not such a crazy idea." Daniel's pulse raced. "Emily, are you?" She laughed, her cheeks pink. "I'm not proposing at the dinner table with pasta sauce everywhere, but if you asked someday, I wouldn't say no." Ethan cheered, throwing his arms in the air. "Yes, best family ever." Daniel laughed, shaking his head. "Slow down, champ, one step at a time." But inside his heart swelled with something fierce and certain. Later that night, when Ethan was tucked in, Daniel and Emily sat on the balcony, the city lights blinking below. "You meant that?" he asked softly. "About not saying no?" Emily turned toward him, her eyes steady. "I've never been more sure of anything." He exhaled, his chest tight with relief and wonder. "Emily, I don't have much. Not money, not a big house. But I have love. I have loyalty. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that's enough." Her hand found his fingers lacing together. "It's more than enough, Daniel. It's everything I ever wanted." They sat in silence, the night breeze wrapping around them. For the first time in years, Daniel didn't just see the future as a struggle to survive. He saw birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings. He saw Emily at his side, Ethan taller every year, a life stitched together from loss and second chances. When he finally kissed her, it wasn't with desperation but with certainty, a promise quiet but unbreakable. And in that moment, under the glow of city lights and the echo of Ethan's laughter down the hall, Daniel realized he hadn't just rescued someone that day at graduation, he had rescued himself. Winter pressed in hard that year, the kind of cold that painted the windows in silver frost and made every breath bloom white in the air. Daniel shoveled the steps while Emily and Ethan decorated the living room, their laughter spilling out into the street like music. For the first time in years, the season didn't feel like something to endure. It felt like home. On Christmas Eve, they gathered around the small tree, patched together with old ornaments from Daniel's past, and a few elegant glass baubles Emily had brought from her father's house. The mix looked strange but beautiful, a mirror of the family they were becoming. Ethan tore open his gifts with squeals of delight, then darted over to hand one small box to Emily. "This one's from Dad," he whispered loudly, grinning. Emily looked at Daniel, who shifted nervously. "Go on," he urged. She peeled back the wrapping to reveal a velvet case. Inside lay a simple silver ring, not flashy, not expensive, just strong and shining. Her breath caught. "Daniel," she whispered. He knelt down in front of her chair, his voice rough with emotion. "Emily, I don't have a fortune, I don't have status. What I have is love for you that won't quit and a promise to stand by you for the rest of my days. Will you marry me?" Her eyes flooded with tears, her hands trembling as she touched his face. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." Ethan whooped so loudly the neighbors probably heard. "I knew it! I knew it!" He threw his arms around them both, nearly knocking Daniel off balance. The three of them laughed through their tears, clinging together in the glow of the Christmas lights. That night, after Ethan had finally fallen asleep, Daniel and Emily sat by the tree, the world hushed and still around them. She rested her head on his shoulder, her hand curled around his. "You know what's funny?" she murmured. "Everyone thought I'd lost everything when the accident happened, but if it hadn't, I never would have met you." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "Life has a strange way of giving us what we need, even when it looks like it's taking everything away." Emily closed her eyes, breathing in the warmth of the moment. For the first time since the accident, she didn't feel broken. She felt whole. And as snow drifted silently past the window, their new family sat together in the quiet glow, three souls who had found each other against all odds, building a future not out of wealth or perfection, but out of love, resilience, and the courage to begin again. Your thoughts will help us create meaningful stories. And if you want to hear more powerful healing stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon so you don't miss any new episodes. And most importantly, share this video with people who need a little hope today. Thank you so much for your time. We hear you, we listen to you, and we are honored to tell these stories for you.